Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, something has changed this week, and the thing that has changed is that we've gone from just talking about Amonkhet to seeing Amonkhet brawling in Standard.
And that's to say nothing of Felidar Guardian not brawling in Standard.
Well, yeah. I guess Liliana plus Felidar Guardian will have to be explored in some other format. It's not going to happen in these 60s and 75s.
I told you it was busted, but that didn't take long. Did not take long.
So, just the cynical part of me is like, there were one really big deck in the format, and then there was Mardu vehicles, and then there was some other decks peppering in. Just kind of third and fourth place decks were substantially below the first two. But now, with Felidar Guardian gone, I feel like we just completely opened up Standard. It'll be completely different. Not like, 3 Mardu vehicles at the top of an open or anything like that. 5 in a top 8.
I mean, when it's a 2-deck format, and then you emergency ban the keystone card of one of the 2 decks, not surprisingly, people didn't really have time to adjust to the new format, and they literally just played the decks they had, and often Mardu, because it was like...
I agree. I think that there are enough little nuggets of things that are threatening to be happening also that are extremely exciting. Because, we could see some nascent new archetypes, not just in the Open, but also in the Classic. There were some new things that I think are worth talking about. Where do you want to start? Should we start with the champion standout, whether or not he was the champion this week? Andrew Jessup with kind of a rehashed Mardu vehicles, or we could talk about Ryan McDonough.
So we'll start with Jessup. I mean, he does have at least 2 new pieces of technology. I mean, I got a feeling we're going to see a lot of both of these. But go ahead.
Yeah. So Jessup started with, a pretty familiar version of
Streamline. I mean, this is just Josh Utterlayton's version.
Mardu vehicles, yeah, but he's got one copy of Cut to Ribbons in the main deck, one copy of Cut to Ribbons in the sideboard, and then a Magma Spray, right? I think that's the extent of his...
he's also got 2 Canyon Sloths, which are actually a deceptively important addition to the mana base.
So Canyon Sloth is the black-red Swamp Mountain with cycling.
Yes, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of this. I mean... it's somewhat counterintuitive because you're like, oh, do I really want a land that's just always tapped in my Mardu vehicles deck? And the answer is, well, it's not that you want to. It's that you're already kind of resigned to that. The real question is if you want Canyon Sloth instead of things like more Shambling Vent or more Needlespire. And part of what makes Canyon Sloth so great, well, there's actually 2 parts. The first is that you really want your tap lands to be black-red. Because Thraben Inspector, Toolcraft Exemplar, they want to come down on turn 1. You don't want to have to play a tap land and then on turn 2 just play Toolcraft Exemplar with a mana wasted.
Conveniently, Patrick, this color combination of Mardu, which is red, black, and white in Standard, doesn't have an option for a land that comes into play tap, does it?
Well, it's
a cycling land that comes into
play. Well, it's my point is not comparing to other cycling lands; it's comparing to other tap lands. You see, Needlespire and Shambling Vent are the standards that people usually play, but Shambling Vent and Needlespire, like for instance, if you play a Shambling Vent and a Mountain, you can get your same colors, right? But Mountain doesn't do anything for you as the way that Plains does.
Oh no, yeah, the 8 pack of awesome 1-drops, they.
And if you play Needlespire
first turn,
if you play Needlespire and Swamp, it's not as bad because at least you have Fatal Push. But you still don't get to play your 1-drop on time. Canyon Sloth is great because you can go turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar off of Plains, turn 2 Thraben Inspector, hit for 3, and play your tap land. your black, red tap land have your colors. So the first part is that you want your tap lands to be black, red instead of white, if possible. But the second part is that you don't actually power up Needle Spire that often. It just takes so much mana, and you've got other stuff to do. It is more common to cycle a Canyon Sloth and then just be looking for more action. So I think Canyon Sloth is an excellent addition and one that we're going to be seeing more of in the months to come.
Yeah, I actually think that Canyon Sloth in a deck like this has some added kind of tactical elements. So he didn't really adjust the mana base upwards, right? Like, I think that one thing that might happen with the cycling lands is that people will play more lands. Just play more lands.
Well, no, I mean, he is playing 25. Yeah, that's because they usually sideboard some of the mana. He actually Jessup moves some of the mana to the main deck. Industry standard for these kinds of decks is often only about 23 land, with just like more mana in the sideboard. So Jessup actually has adjusted the mana base upward, taking into consideration having both 2 Canyon Sloth and 2 Shambling Vet.
Yeah, so I think I was kind of thinking about it from the 75 perspective. But of course, you're right. You know, we see
as
few as 23. But my macro point is that when you have these lands as part of the mix, it's very tactical, not just strategic. Like, if you've got one of these hands that, or your draw in general is like all the aggro stuff, then you get rid of your extra lands, right? But if you've got all the expensive cards, like the Nahiris, the Sorens, the Archangel Avacens, then you play the lands, right? And so it's real interesting. It's kind of like the entire Alan Comer strategy, but compacted into a non-spell part of your deck, right? Like, this draws you into action if you need action, or it is your land if you need land.
Yep. And actually, I think that you make a good point with the Sorens and then also the cut to ribbons. This is a Mardu deck that can take advantage of having extra mana better than a lot of previous versions. I mean, they always would board up to more mana to be able to support the sort of mid-rangey Planeswalker game after sideboarding. You know, the Oath of Liliana, Nahiri, Sorin, Gideon, that whole thing. But the addition of Cut to Ribbons, which we only see 1+1 here, but I would imagine we'll see even more of in the future. Cut to Ribbons is another great mana sink. You can use it early on as a removal spell, and then when the game goes long, you've got a finisher that's just building up, providing inevitability.
Oh yeah, it's kind of sort of a perfect card, right? So for 2 mana, it's so good at that thing.
It's only 1 mana short. It's only 1 damage short of a roast, but it can also hit flyers. I mean, Flame Slash, even for 2, would see play in plenty of formats.
But the back half of it is like, I'm sure there are just so many decks that however that Ribbons gets into the graveyard, whether it's from a cut being cast or being discarded to a Nahiri or something else, that they just are on a clock now, right? They're like, I have to kill this guy before he gets to, blah, blah amount of mana because I'm just dead. Like, it actually removes the potential fork of somebody flooding out, right? Because the threat is already waiting. If they just, flood, it's actually potentially worse for them.
I think Cut to Ribbons is a very misunderstood card. It's already developing a following because it's just such a great it's so desirable of things you want to be doing. But, like, I actually think that it's a fair bit stronger than I've seen a lot of people discussing. I think it's actually got, in a sideways kind of way, a lot of similarities to Profane Command.
Oh, a Patrick Chapin favorite.
I think Profane Command, where you are, instead of getting the second X spell someday, you actually just cast Cut now. It's like you're getting part of the Profane Command early. And you get to start just meaningfully impacting the board with a 2 mana deal 4 instead of, Profane Command. So often you end up in spots where you got to spend 4 or 5 mana to even do anything with it. You don't want to be just flooded on Profane Commands early on. But Cut to Ribbons is actually not the worst card to be a little long on.
Oh no, I didn't think about the Profane Command kind of parallel, but it's obvious now that you say it. And Profane Command was such a
defining. That helped define the format.
I just remember, that when I played that Biorhythm deck, just crushed my opponent in game 1, and I just had him locked down in games 2 and 3 with just massive advantages in terms of card advantage and board presence, etc. And he just blasted me for X, and that was it. I think it's just a great additional functionality, because if you think about it, cards like Sorin Grim Nemesis actually give a Mardu deck kind of this functionality, but Ribbons has haste, if that makes it, like instead of kind of a progressive way of getting up there, it just brain you for however much X you have.
Mm-hmm. So definitely some good stuff, but I think that Jessup definitely was on the conservative side of not really changing the recipe too much.
Yeah, what I loved about this top 8, even just you joke, or I joke, or somebody jokes about so many Mardu vehicles decks making top 8. It's that for certain players, it's kind of this false sense of non-motion. The reality is, you're right. The ban came late. The cards are not super available yet, and we get a chance to open into the format with something familiar. But there's just so much possibility here, and I think Jessup's deck is a good example of that. Like, you just have this little tweak. You just have a little Cuts of Ribbons, a little Magma Spray, a little Canyon Sloth, but you don't have to push very far before there are completely different incentives that are being realized.
So, second place.
Oh, on that
go ahead.
note, just there are a lot of things you can do with your 2 ofs or your 3-drop choice in this archetype. Whether it's motorists or whatever. I just wanted to shout out to Jessup's choice of Thalia Heretic Cathar, in particular as we move to the second place deck. Because what is Ryan McDonough's big addition to Mardu vehicles?
Oh, well, without question, it's the addition of Glorybringer.
Yeah,
one of my picks for best cards in the set.
I think Glorybringer. Yeah, this is exactly how I thought Glorybringer was gonna kind of make its debut. A big threat. I guess he's taking the place of Archangel Avacyn, right? And
yep.
Gideon Killer, haste threat, whatever. But man, Thalia is real good against Glorybringer.
Yeah, particularly if Ryan has 4 fatal pushes, and throughout this weekend, I think that we just saw a big increase in fatal push. People were already obviously big in fatal push anyway, but in Mardu vehicles, there used to be a lot of people playing shock.
Yeah,
particularly in decks with veteran motorist, and Ryan's list has 3 mountains in just 1 swamp with 4 veteran motorists. This is a deck where shock is actually easier to cast than fatal push, and he's still playing 4 fatal push, no shock. I think that this is one of the ripples caused by banning a Felidar Guardian.
Yeah, it seems like
fatal push is a stronger card in the first place.
It's an overcorrection, though, right? So shock,
well, I don't know. Push is a better card.
Shock is great. I don't know which one's better, but shock is great if you need to stop somebody from going off with Saheeli. It's not better if it's easier to cast the other one. Like, that's just it is. I don't know.
Well, let's put it this way: I'm not
sure a better card than I don't know. I'm using a bad.
Then what? Ancestral Recall? No, definitely not.
So, you're talking about cards that have somewhat different functionalities.
But you can also Fatal Push is a strong. I'm just saying it's not that it's better all the time in context. I'm just saying Fatal Push is a stronger card. You might still want to play Shock, but it's worth noting that it's not crazy that Ryan went to Fatal Push, and it's a thing that we saw a lot of other people do, and. What's interesting is that Thalia is a little harder to fatal push, whereas Thalia is easy to shock. But cutting all these shocks for fatal pushes made it so that Thalia is more likely to live. And when Thalia lives, Glorybringer is much less of a threat.
That's exactly my line of thinking. If we're talking about Fatal Push, Fatal Push kills Thalia sometimes, right? But man, it's just super easy to shock Thalia, and it's like not super easy to kill Thalia with Fatal Push. You just have to do a little work.
I think we're going to see more Magma Sprays. I think Magma Spray is a better shock these days for an awful lot of purposes. It's still nice to go upstairs sometimes, but I think we're going to see an increase in Magma Sprays here and there.
Well, of course, Scrap Heap Scrounger was a card that at one point you suggested might be ban-worthy. So, Magma Spray is an outstanding solution to Scrap Heap Scrounger because you could just trade it 1-for-1 and then the Scrounger never has an opportunity to generate card advantage. Right? Like, a lot of these other trades, you're like, all right, I'll trade 1-for-1, but the Scrounger's going to get money some point.
So actually, in the space of Thalia's, Sam Kayla finished third with a double Thalia Heretic Cathar list. His twist, he did have the Archangels instead of the Glorybringers, but he had a couple twists. His first twist was instead of Cultivator's Caravan, he's got 2 cast outs. 2 cast outs. What do you think of that one?
Love it. So the cast outs, first of all, they're like hyper flexible answers, right? I actually think that the cast outs kind of speak to his own deck list. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, here's a guy who's got Archangel Avacyn and Hazaret the Fervent. And
that's the other twist.
Yeah, and he's just like, well, if I'm playing with cards like Hazaret the Fervent, maybe other people will. And if that's the case, I better be able to deal with one. This thing's indestructible. I don't know. I'm just imagining that's part of his thought process. People often, when they make changes or adaptations with new cards becoming available to existing archetypes, they often think, a step ahead of even their own, kind of choices.
What do you think of Hazaret, by the way?
I think it's good. I think it's a good card. I think it's potentially really powerful. I think that you're looking at an archetype here that has a ton of 1-drops. You can get low pretty reasonably. It's pretty tough to get all the way down to 1, I think, if you've got too many Archangel Avacyns. So I think that Hazaret's probably pretty good. I think that if you're going to play Hazaret in an archetype like this, you're going to have to really think about how many Gideons, how many cast-outs, even how many... the answer is 4 Unlicensed Disintegration, obviously. But, I don't think that Hazaret is at its best in a Mardu Vehicles that has a bunch of 4s and 5s. This archetype is designed so that if you don't have your mana coming out, super fast, that you have all of these cards like Fatal Push and Unlicensed Disintegration, etc., that stretch the game to the point that you can actually cast your bombs. And that's not really consistent with Hazaret as... You think, what is the best Hazaret? It's like a 5-power haste creature for 4, and I don't think that he's often getting that version of Hazaret.
So how much trouble do you think this deck's going to actually have getting low? Shout out to Little John, by the way.
I don't know what Little John is.
It's all right. It was after your time. But how difficult? How often? Is it really just you can't play too much of that stuff, or else you'll get glutted with these 5s in your hand, and Hazaret won't work then?
I think Hazaret's great in a deck that is mindful of Hazaret. I think that Hazaret's probably pretty good sometimes in this archetype. You can see he only played 1. I don't know if that's because he only had 1.
No. I actually think a lot of the gods are great 1-ofs. I think that the Bantu and Ronus are more commonly going to be larger numbers.
Yeah.
I actually think too many people jump straight to putting a bunch of Hazarets in their deck.
Well,
there's a lot of decks that I like 1 Hazaret, and there's a lot of other decks that I like 1 of the blue one. Kefnet?
This deck is going to get stuck with a bunch of Gideons and or Archangel Avacyns sometimes. And or I guess what you could do is just not play the Hazaret. If you're in a situation where you have a bunch of 4s and 5s, you play the other cards and you play the Hazaret last. That's a thing you can do, which is that can be okay. I don't know. We never actually talked about this aspect of Hazard. I think if you have a bunch of expensive stuff and you're not particularly getting your lands flowing, the 2R ability to discard a card to nug each opponent for 2, I don't really see that as being the saving grace. You know, it's very expensive for that ability. And it's not bad, right? It's
not very efficient. The one thing I like about it
are like,
yeah, definitely, overwhelmingly. Yeah, I think it's powerful on its own. I just think that it depends on how much of the power do you want to be in the body versus the ability. I think they didn't want the ability to be that much of the power, and I think it was a smart choice on their part. I do think you're going to find that the ability can be tactically valuable for hitting down planeswalkers. Like the other part that I'm not the biggest Tezzeret guy, but the other part that I do like about it is its ability to sidestep Ishkana. Because I think Ishkana is going to be is going to put a huge amount of pressure, and it's just so good against Mardu vehicles, and it's nice to have a plan of how you're going to get around it.
So I do think that the choice of Cast Out versus Cultivator Caravan is unusual in the sense that Sam has Hazard and if Hazard isn't online, he could still crew, right? And
yep.
You know, he could crew Heart. You know, he could theoretically crew Cultivator's Caravan if we were here. So that's an aspect that he doesn't have. But I think a little subtly, Cultivator's Caravan is a card that helps you get cards out of your hand. And it just seems a little, you know, it's just a little thing that, like...
Well, even building on that exact thing, he's got only 24 land... And Cast Out is just not as much mana as Cultivator's Caravan. It's something, you know. Because
land. I mean, if you look at Jessup's deck,
I don't know.
He had 25 lands and the Caravans, right?
Well, so he didn't actually have Caravans.
Oh, so he didn't have Caravans. I'm sorry. It was McDonough who played the Caravans. But I guess McDonough only had 24 lands. I don't know. I guess I don't have a point then.
So Lawrence Vess, no relation to Liliana, Lawrence Vess finished 7th with a version that had both. I mean, also Thalia, Heretic Athar, very popular card throughout, very popular. But his version, 3 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, because he also had 3 Gideon of the Trials.
I don't know about this 3 Gideon Ally of Zendikar.
Something to note. If you got to take in the whole picture to appreciate what's going on with Lawrence Vess's list, the only red in the main deck, 4 Unlicensed Disintegration, done, full stop. The only black in the main deck, the 4 Unlicensed Disintegration and 3 Fatal Push, done. I mean, there's Scrappy Scrounger's ability, but you don't even need that. So this is a list that has a very different take on mana. This list has more ability to play its white cards because it's supporting so many Gideons and of both varieties, but it's also just basically a mono white deck splash Unlicensed Disintegration.
I mean, that's a heck of a card to splash, right?
No Veteran Motorist, no Glorybringer, no Hazaret, none of that stuff. It's just a white deck. What do you think of Gideon of the Trials in this list?
I actually think Gideon of the Trials is kind of weird because it's in conflict with Thalia, right? Like, I guess you typically play Gideon on 3rd turn. Thalia is such a powerful card against non-basic lands, though. So
here's a combo for you. Heart of Kirin plus Gideon of the Trials.
I mean, that's a lot of damage.
That's a really good combo, right?
Yeah.
Because you can both bash with the Gideon and crew the Heart even if you have no creatures.
Well, it's also like hyper defense, right? Like, because the +1 on Gideon of the Trials is really powerful, and then you're also adding loyalty to fuel a potentially defensive Heart of Kirin.
Yeah, so your Heart of Kirin is threatening to block something, and your Gideon is locking down something, and you're still bashing for 4 a turn without your loyalty dwindling.
Yeah, I think that I really like Gideon of the Trials. I mean, it's not surprising that I like Gideon of the Trials. I just think that, like, there's like a a weird dance between Thalia, Gideon, and Gideon. And I just don't know about no fourth Gideon ally of Zendikar anywhere. I mean, I guess you could not play 4 in the main deck if you have all these other Gideons.
I would play 4 Gideon 4.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, Gideon ally of Zendikar is, like, the least restricted legendary type planeswalker type card ever in terms of diminishing returns, right? Like, the card is just built for getting around that.
Yes, but there is a subtle little tension between the two Gideons. While it's true that your opponent's going to want to kill your Gideon, Gideon of the Trials is the sort of planeswalker that sits in play for a number of turns. And it can make it really awkward if you play a Gideon of the Trials on 3 and then you just have a Gideon ally of Zendikar in your hand. Because you can just be stuck in this spot where you're like, well, the game is in kind of a stasis, but my Gideon is just in play living and I don't have I'm not going to kill them. It's not like Gideon ticking up is ever going to ultimate into some crazy way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a. I think that's obviously going to come up sometimes, but I also think that's kind of
it comes up a fair bit.
An odd situation, because you can pick the order you play your cards.
Yeah, but I actually think that sequence is a very normal thing. It's something you got to live with because Gideon of the Trials. It doesn't mean you have to live with it in this deck, but I think that a lot of decks are going to play both Gideons. I think that Gideon ally of Zendikar is one of the few cards in the format better than Gideon of the Trials. But I think that it's actually an argument of why you want 4 Gideon ally of Zendikar instead of 2 Gideon of the Trials instead of 3 and 3. Because if you're going to get stuck with multiple Gideons, it can actually be, the way that the Mardu vehicle deck plays out, it can actually be better to be stuck with multiple Gideon 4s instead of a variety for the exact reasons you were already describing how Gideon ally of Zendikar is one of the best, quasi-legendary bombs to draw multiples of. But Gideon if you draw one of each, it can actually be sort of awkward because you don't want to wait on your Gideon to the Trials until after you play Gideon 4, or else why didn't you just have another Gideon 4?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would have played 4 copies of Gideon 4.
Yeah, that's what I think. So I think that there's, clearly Mardu vehicles came out in spades this past weekend with 5 in the top 8, including 1, 2, 3. But that was, everybody saw that coming before just because of the super, super late ban. However, I did want to hit some of the non-Mardu vehicle decks.
Absolutely, but before we move off, I just want to say, which is your favorite of the 5 or so Mardu decks? What spoke to you from this style?
So I don't know that I would build Mardu vehicles I think there's a lot of room for customization exploration.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about which specific build. Beyond, I can tell you that Ryan is it Dona? So Ryan's second place Mardu list with the Glory Bringers. I'm a Glory Bringer guy.
Yeah.
If I'm playing Mardu vehicles, I'm bringing some glory. Everything else stems from that for me.
Other
personally.
than Gideon.
Yeah, but to me, it's already a given that I'm playing for Gideon ally of Zendikars.
Yeah, I love Glorybringer too, but I think that I like Lawrence Vess's build just in terms of some of its, idiosyncrasies, because I think that so much of this deck, in terms of where it sits in context, not just about how it operates itself, but how it operates against specific opponents, especially when the most common opponent is going to be other Mardu Vehicles decks, it looks like, at least in the shortest term. This deck is just built to make Heart of Kiran look like an all-star, right? And that's spectacular to me. It's like, I don't know if you saw the version of green-white tokens from the Pro Tour that was Lamhold Pacifists and Nissa 3. It was just built for Heart of Kiran. This is that deck with better cards.
I do got to give a shout out to Andrew Jessup, though. Not only obviously taking down the trophy, but I think Cut to Ribbons. It's it blows my mind that he was the only one in the top 8 to play Cut to Ribbons. Cut to Ribbons to me just seems so good. So I got to give him some credit on that one. I mean, a lot of people in this tournament play Glorybringer in one deck or another. But Cut to Ribbons, I think, is definitely one of the more underrated cards.
Yeah, it's gonna become a staple, I'm sure, at some point.
So can we jump to fourth place? Zach Stearns, Boros Humans.
I like this deck a lot.
I was going to say, this is a list. As soon as I saw this list, this instantly struck me as a Michael J. Flores. This is a deck that really is cut from your school of deck building's cloth.
I mean, I think that he just did a great job with this deck. This is very close to. I hate to give myself like a pat on the head. He did a better job than I would have done if I built this deck. It's very close to what I was thinking about. I think he just did a better job. Like it's low to the ground. This deck, like if you miss a step, it's gonna smash you just on its regular draw. But then he's got these great draws that are like Glory Bound, Initiate, into Always Watching. The Baneslayer Angel draw. I love it, and he's just like so unafraid to kind of kill darlings, but then still play them. Like, and he's got that whole kind of Tom Ross thing going on. He's got four Needle Spires in the sideboard, and then
before we even get to that, though, can we touch on something in the main deck before we switch over? Because I think the sideboard is like super transformative.
I love his sideboard. Go ahead, whatever.
But the main deck, out of the main deck, so notice he's playing 22 land already in his main deck. 22 already. And he actually resisted the urge to play with some of the sick one-cost red humans, like specifically the one in the new set, the 1/1 that you can tap to give one of your creatures haste. Even though he's playing 4 Handweir Garrison. Handweir Garrison is a very exciting human. It takes really, really good. It makes really good use of both Thalia's Lieutenant and Metallic Mimic, because when you have the Garrison, you can actually get extra mileage out of all that token making. You know, you're getting like effectively. I mean, Garrison straight up is like hitting for 4 with the prospect of hitting for 6 next turn in sort of a Goblin Rabblemaster sort of vibe. But with Metallic Mimic and Thalia's Lieutenant, you actually just blow it out of the water sometimes.
That's what I'm thinking when, like, I think I would have thought of some of these red cards, but I don't think I would have gone Garrison. And that's one of the things that I think is great about this deck, because I think he just, like, stepped out of the 2s with Garrison. Like, I think that Gossip Monger and Thraben Inspector and Expedition Envoy, those are all, like, super obvious. I mean, once you get to Always Watching, then Glory Bound Initiative is super obvious. Obviously,
Honor Crop Captain, you got to give credit, though. Honor Crop Captain is one that was under a lot of people's radar.
Yeah, that one is not obvious, but I think it doesn't take so much to get there. Thalia's Lieutenant is obviously the most obvious, but, like, the Garrison is just like, hold on, we are in a completely different time zone now. Like, this is I think that this is like a splatterfest, this card. With Thalia's Lieutenant, forget about it.
And the part that's really interesting is this sideboard, which takes the transformative sideboard of some of these Boros human decks and dials it up. I mean, this is taking it up to 11. He's got 4 Needle Spires in his sideboard despite 22 land in his main deck. Most of the Boros decks that have 4 Needle Spires in the sideboard are only playing 20 land.
Could have 18.
Yeah, exactly. So, but with 22 land in the main deck, going up to 26, he can actually support not only the 4 Gideons that are so common out of the sideboard, but also 4 Glorybringer.
Yeah, I think like he's like basically the Rock after sideboarding, where he's just like super high quality, like mid range threats with a bunch.
Well, I think this is just like what the Mardu decks do. You know, he transforms in much the same way that the Mardu vehicle decks transform.
Yeah, I buy that.
Where you get your mana base up to 25, 26, and then you've got extra planeswalkers, extra big expensive threats. It's just that since he's only playing 2 colors, obviously he doesn't have Sorin. He's just got more Glory Bringers. But he actually is – it's not going all the way the same way they are, but this is a deck that starts faster than Mardu vehicles anyway.
Oh, yeah. This deck is – I mean, of the decks I've seen so far, this seems like the most offensively capable deck, right? Like, this deck is just a – it could be like 2-1 on the first turn and just go to town.
So there's actually a new entry for the aggro, like, sort of title, and that's Caleb Shearer's mono black aggro. And this isn't just zombies. This is mono black aggro, like, you know, just straightforward black aggro, without being as slavishly committed to a linear.
Any particular strategy. He's just got whatever cards seem to
are the
be
most aggressive.
Good, at that cost, which I gotta respect. And the one that I didn't see myself, so I was super impressed with, is Bone Picker. Really?
You're talking about Black Delver? This is Delver of Secrets, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's I think that was, like, really, really cool.
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of Bone Picker.
Was that an intuitive card to you? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think just the prospect of getting a 1-mana 3/2 flying Death Touch, it's like, it's not the same as Delver of Secrets, but I think it's a highly it's one I've been writing about a little bit. Tom Ross actually wrote pretty extensively, just a great breakdown of why this card is so exciting from a beatdown standpoint. It takes looking at the cards from a little bit different of an angle, because it asks of you something a little different than the aggro decks have.
It asks so little.
Well, that's part of the whole joke with Bone Picker, is that you can either go hard on it, where you're actually playing sack outlets and stuff, or you could actually just rely on the fact that if your opponent doesn't block you, then you're already happy. You know, and even if they do, Dread Wanderer is not like, there's going to be times where you go, turn 1 Dread Wanderer, your opponent plays a Sylvan Advocate because they went first, and you go, don't care, attack.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Okay, block. And you're like, okay, 2 Bone Pickers, go. Plus, it's not like the Dread Wanderer isn't going to be back later.
Oh, no, he'll be back. But the thing is, this card is like, like, if your deck just goes, you know, to top deck mode in the mid game, like, just playing a 3/2 Death Touch flying is fine, right? Like, it's just fine.
Oh yeah,
but like,
that's not the worst floor. That is not the worst floor. It blocks Glorybringer. It blocks Heart of Kirin.
It's literally just fine. But the other thing is, this deck's just got, like, Fatal Push and stuff, right? Like, just set it up.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do things like play a turn 2 Walking Ballista, and then just go nuts on turn 3, where you shoot something, or just go to their face if you want, Fatal Push something, and drop 2 Bone Pickers.
Yeah.
Because you get to leverage all the different, you know. So,
I totally do not hate Never Return in this deck.
No, I think Never Return is a good card. It's not mind blowing or anything, but it's a good card.
Yeah, but like a lot of the time you look at it and you're like, I'm not like super into this card, but it just seems perfect for this strategy to me.
Well, there's a little bit of sideways synergy you get a few different places. You know, like this deck has 3 Liliana the Last Hope, and with 4 Scrap Heap Scrounger, 4 Dread Wanderer, and 3 Never to Return, this deck actually has 11 graveyard synergy cards that you can just mill. You don't even have to draw them. You can just, as your Liliana the Last Hope is +2ing to go get back something else,
mm-hmm.
If you ever just flip over one of those 11 cards, it's like you're up a card.
Yep.
You know, Liliana just looks super impressive in this list. I like the Disciplined Curve. You know, at 1, he's obviously got Night Market, Lookout, Dread Wanderer, and then hopefully an end-step Fatal Push. At 2, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Walking Ballista, and Glint Sleeve Siphoner. And then Grasp of Darkness, Collective Brutality, Never to Return. Lots of efficient removal. with just 3 Planeswalker, or just 3 Lilianas and 3 Never to Returns, this is actually like a pretty good, pretty low curve. What do you think of the 2 Aether Hubs in this list, though?
Yeah, that's I don't know. They seem kind of excessive to me.
You don't think you think that's too greedy? The whole thing is powering up the Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Yeah, I know what they're for. They're just like it's just. I don't know. I don't think I'd go there. Like you're just asking for it. His deck is like got to be pretty consistent because it's one color. Almost all the lands tap for B, but he's also got like Gifted Aetherborn, right? You really
the sideboard of Gifted Aetherborns.
You really don't want to have the Aether Hub in your opening. So at 20 land, you're slave to your opening land draw a lot, right? And you just don't want to have Aether Hub and Gifted Aetherborn in your opening hand. Like, what if you have like 2 Gifted Aetherborns and your lands are like Aether Hub Swamp? Like, you're like, oh, that doesn't come up that often. Okay, I agree. It doesn't come up that often. Why do you have to ever make it come up? There's nothing making you play this way.
What do you think of Scarab Feast as a 4 of in the sideboard?
I think that he had his eye on a different predicted metagame than I would have come in. Because he's...
What do you think these were targeting? What were these targeting?
Scroungers?
Yeah?
I don't know. Like... I guess.
I mean, everybody had Scroungers.
Flashback cards, right? Like, or I'm sorry, aftermath cards like Never to Returns or Cut to Ribbons or whatever.
That's kind of a tough way to do it, though. I mean, that's not really why you would put that in a mono black aggro sideboard, is it?
I mean, it's weird because we talked about it before. Like, Scarab Feast is the kind of card that you can get away with playing main deck, but it seems like a pretty low powered sideboard card to me. You can go in other directions, I think, if you want to have an effect like this.
So if you're playing against when I see Scarab Feast, the first thing I think of with a deck like this is that it's for black-green. Or really just any deck with Ishkana. Because when they
mess up Delirium?
Yeah, in response. Because if the opportunity cost in a grindy matchup of a 1-cost cycling card is actually not that high. Right?
Yeah.
It is actually pretty easy to cycle to find a spot to cycle Scarab Feast and just look for more of your good cards.
I guess if you're just trading 1 mana for a 4/4 Flying Angel or for all the spiders or something like that, then that's pretty good. Actually, it's probably really good against also.
It hits Traverse.
Traverse, yeah.
When they traverse, you take the type that they are missing. Like whichever thing they're missing most of. Remember, you get to exile up to 3 also. So you really take them off of Delirium. It's not just that you're like, oh, I countered their Ishkana. You've taken them you might take multiple types away. They might be off Delirium for several turns. You shrink their Grim Flare in the middle of combat. You can actually counter certain types of Liliana activations. Like for instance, if they play Liliana 5 and they want to reanimate something, you can exile the thing they wanted to reanimate and cool. 2 other things. You get to take out if you're getting to counter a Traverse with it on the stack or an Ishkana's enters the battlefield trigger is already very exciting, and being able to counter Grim Flare and all those things, that adds up to a lot. I actually really like the Scarab Feasts, and I think that we should see more of the little value Scarab Feasts.
As sideboard cards?
Yeah. You can play it main deck also, but I think that for some reason people get in their heads sometimes that you're not supposed to sideboard cards with cycling, because otherwise why wouldn't you put it in the main deck? And the answer is because in this spot, this is a very aggressive deck that game 1 needs to use its mana for aggression. What if you're playing against Mardu? Of course you could Scarab Feast a Scrounger once in a while or something, but that's just, you have to work hard to even get your card back. And every time you spend a mana cycling Scarab Feast, you're way behind against the Toolcraft Exemplar deck. Whereas against Green-Black Delirium, the nature of the Green-Black Delirium decks is, they have so much removal, you have so much removal, the game gets drug out, you end up having spots where you would have wasted the mana anyway. And when you're playing against Green-Black Delirium, it's so valuable to be able to hit 3 cards. Whereas against Mardu, you're not really ever hitting more than 1 card most of the time anyway. And when you're playing against Green-Black Delirium, you really want to draw 1 Scarab Feast. You don't want to draw 2. And by playing with a card that has cycling of 1, it's actually safe to play 4 copies of it, because even if you draw 2, you can just cycle one of them and not be stuck.
I buy it. What do you think about Night Market Lurkout?
If you're in the market for black aggressive creatures, it does too. It's a little weird playing Night Market Lookout without any vehicles at all. I like Night Market Lookout a little bit better as part of a crew package for Heart of Kirin or Cultivator's Caravan or something. You know, because I like that combo when you're using the Night Market Lookout to crew vehicles as a extra form of reach.
Yeah, you just get like a little ding-ding in there.
Yeah, but this version is pure. It's also worth noting that gaining life does matter. You know, like this deck can do a little bit of racing. It's not nothing.
Yeah, I think the problem is that he just gets blanked by every deck. You know, not too deep. I don't know. I guess you go like Exemplar on defense or something. It's a horrible trade, but I can't look away from those 4 gifted Aetherborns in the sideboard. I think that card is so good.
It seems pretty good to me. I also like gifted Aetherborn in this. I mean,
format. Obviously, there's a wide gulf between 1 mana and 2 mana. There's no denying that. Obviously, you know this deck probably gets a lot of percentage points just playing a 1-drop on turn 1, no matter what that 1-drop is. So, who am I to say? But it seems like a really low power card in this deck.
So, rounding out the top 8, we have Brennan DeCandio's Black-Green Delirium deck. And
Brennan DeCandio playing Black-Green. What a surprise.
Yep. And this is a little bit of a return to the kind of classic Black-Green Delirium. Going so far as to incorporate 4 Vessel of Nascency. His new additions for his creatures include 1 Manglehorn, and that's it. But he does take advantage of the recently unbanned Ishkana. Yeah, like I think a lot of people didn't really appreciate at first just how much Ishkana has been taken off the bench. I mean, Ishkana was still playable before, but I think that it has...
Yeah, like a third of the format is really bad against it.
It has, well, yeah. Ishkana has skyrocketed to being one of the 5 defining cards of the format.
Again.
This is, again, Ishkana is back, baby. And then for his removal, of note, more Never to Returns, which obviously combine well with Vessel of Nascency. So what do you think of this list?
Just obvious to point out, 4 copies of Traverse the Uvenwald in this deck, which are going to support the one-off copies of Noxus Gearhulk and Manglehorn. I don't know, like, the black-green decks have so much customization available. I think you just, like, pick the cards that he either wanted to play or he thought were going to match up well against the projected opponents. I think it's weird that he only played 1/1 Manglehorn, though.
Oh, no. So I would only want to play 1/1 Manglehorn. I actually think 1/1 Manglehorn might be the perfect amount. I think you could potentially play more on the board, but I wouldn't play more than 1 in the main deck.
Oh, no, I'm not necessarily saying you should play more than 1 in the main deck, especially if you have 4 copies of Traverse. But I think 1 copy in the sideboard is kind of weird. Like, there are a lot of decks that have quite a few artifacts, you know, whether they're vehicles or, you know, utility artifacts, things like, I don't know, Aetherworks Marvels or Dynavolt Towers. You just want to have more than a couple, not even just access, right? Like, forget about the fact that 2 Manglehorns and 4 Traverses is basically 6. You only get to cast them twice. I mean, I guess you can Liliana, but, like, it seems it's not really.
So, actually, speaking of that, I just can't get into the Ob Nixilis main deck. I think Ob Nixilis is just not in the same. Like, Ob Nixilis is a good card, but Liliana Death's Majesty is a great one. Particularly when you've got a deck that takes advantage of the self-mill that she provides for free, and a deck that has self-mill in the form of things like Vessel of Nascency, so that it's more likely that Liliana gets juicy targets, and this is a deck that has access to juicy targets like Ishkana and Noxious Gearhulk.
I think I agree. the other thing I think is weird is, like, if you're going to invest in cards like Gonti, like, don't you think that the numbers on Tireless Tracker and maybe even Grimflayer are kind of weird? Right? Like,
well, no, I like 4 Grimflayer. That part I don't mind. I do think that 2 Tireless Tracker is, I guess he has 2+1. I would personally play more Tireless Trackers. I think it's a great time for Tireless Tracker.
Yeah, I'm saying, especially if you're like, look, I'm the kind of person who's willing to invest in Gonti, right? I feel like these other cards are like, not that Grimflayer isn't a great card. I just think that it's a little at odds. Like, it's such an aggressive card, and I guess it's like super synergistic with just his Stellarium theme. Maybe I'm just
the one that I will tell you. No, but there is a point you didn't mention it, but I think that you're right. Grimflayer opens up your vulnerability to Fatal Push. Like, I don't know that you can really get away with not playing the 2s, but if you're going to be on turn 2, if your turn 1 and 2 is largely spent playing Vessel of Decency, Fatal Push, Grasp of Darkness, Traverse the Ulvenwald, maybe you don't need to play a 2-on-2. I mean, Walking Ballista is a little different because of how often you can get value and how often against somebody with Fatal Push you can hold it and do something bigger. But maybe instead of Grimflayer, you're supposed to play more 3s and maybe you're supposed to play with an extra Tireless Tracker or 2. Maybe you're supposed to play an extra Ishkana. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I just think it's I could be completely off on this. It just seems a little odd. And from my vantage point, just come back to the question you asked a couple of minutes ago. This archetype, especially when you're talking about playing all 4 copies of Traverse the Ulvenwald, is like basically the most customizable of all of the major archetypes in Standard. So you can pretty much play, like, he's got like 1 Noxious Gearhulk. He could theoretically have played more than 1 Noxious Gearhulk.
Oh, yeah. I think it's totally reasonable to play more than 1.
Or played like not Special District, sorry. Like Verdurous Gearhulk, right? None of those. Like, only 2 Ishkanos. Is that a big number or a small number?
Small.
I don't know.
I do. Small. The answer is small.
I think that I would default to 3. That's where I'd start if I was going to go that direction. That card is very good when you draw it in the right matchups.
I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm too greedy, but I just feel like 1 Evolving Wilds is just throwing away equity. You don't need to play so few Evolving Wilds. I just want to make sure that my tracker gets paid double. I want my Traverse to be turned on. And I just want my Ishkanas popping ASAP.
Maybe. I always have 4 in these decks.
I would play more Evolving Wild. I don't know that I would play 4 because I do think the format's pretty fast. I think 4 is totally defensible, however. I just think that, to me, 1 is surprisingly few. But notice, I do like the Scarab Feast in the sideboard, by the way. I have to see more of that card.
Yeah.
Now, how do you they're as night and day as they come for being 2 decks of the same color combination. But Sean Ellis's green-black deck that he finished 12th with is a very different cut of green-black.
Well, yeah, it's listed as green-black aggro again, I mean, it's got, it's very, very aggressive relative to Brennan's deck. Right? He's got Greenbelt Rampager on the 1, and then a host of things he can play for 2, right? Like, Walking Ballista is theoretically a 2, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, which we've seen before. Obviously, Buddies with Greenbelt Rampager. Grimflayer and Glint Sleeve Siphoner in the same deck is uncommon, right? I don't recall seeing that.
Well, most people don't have room for... This is like 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. He has 22 drops in addition to the Grasp of Darknesses. Most people never have room for this. He's got a full package of Blossoming Defense, a full package of Fatal Push, a full package of Grasp. You're like, how in the world does he have room for this? He's playing 16 lands.
16 lands. But he managed to play 3 Evolving Wilds. 16 lands. And there's no trackers anywhere.
Well, I wouldn't play Tracker in a 16-land deck, I don't think.
Would you play Gonti?
Not normally. No.
I would play Tracker before I played Gonti.
The 3 sideboard Gontis are a little wild. But I don't know. This deck doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't look like this is enough mana. So there must be something I'm missing because this deck that can't even function with one land. Like you have no real 1-drops.
I could see playing a deck like this, but I'd play like maybe 4 Traverse, at least 2 Traverse as well. That's the only way you can get away with it, in my opinion.
He's playing 4 Attune with Ether.
And 2 Ether Hub?
Yeah, but there's you're not going to even draw 2 mana sources a fair amount of the time,
like
and even when you do,
in the games.
Even when you do, he's got 3 Swamps and 2 Ether Hubs. I don't know. This maybe you choose to draw. I don't know.
No, you do not choose to draw. This is an aggro deck.
Worth pointing out, 3 copies of Dispossess in the sideboard for going after people's Torrential Gearhulks. Kind of interesting. So there's a different kind of zombie deck. A different kind of black aggro deck, the zombies, of which we saw a couple different styles, both white-black and mono-black. Did you see Zach Cadillo's black-white zombies deck with
the 14th place deck? I did.
Yes. What are your thoughts on this one? His only white being 4 Wayward Servant.
So this deck is kind of really echoing some of the stuff that you said last week when you said, hey, I think that zombies, potentially black-white zombies, is going to be tier 1. We see like the Colossus here. You said this guy's underrated. And of course we've got synergies like Cryptbreaker into Scrapheap Scrounger, Cryptbreaker into Dread Wanderer, Lord of the Accursed.
Plague Belcher.
Yeah, oh man, Plague Belcher. This card's really impressive. A 5/4 creature for only 3. So synergistic with your stuff that you can get back. I think that this is going to be an archetype, like you said, that's going to be it's going to be potentially tier 1. I don't know that I love this implementation more than say just like the mono black aggro deck we saw before. I don't know. I guess it has like really good 1-drops. Like that's. Yeah, I think I'd rather just even the mono black aggro. Wouldn't you rather have Cryptbreaker?
Nah.
No.
Oh, Cryptbreaker in the mono black.
Yeah, instead of the one guy that taps and deals a point.
But I just wouldn't play the mono black deck. The mono black deck doesn't make sense to me the same way. I think that the zombies just seem so much. There's so much more potential, I think, with a good zombie deck than mono black personally.
Well, it
could be mono black zombies if you want, but I just think that the zombie tribe is the most appealing part of that sort of mono black.
It's textbook greater than the sum of its parts, right?
Yeah. 4 Gideon Ally of Zendikar is interesting, with the only white being 4 Shambling Vent, 4 Concealed Courtyard, 2 Aether Hub, only 20 land total.
Well, I think that when you're going to play this deck, like you said before, Wayward Servant is the only white card in the main deck. You're investing in, Aether Hub, Concealed Courtyard, and Shambling Vent. At least Gideon gives you a gigantic payoff, right?
Yeah, but it's so hard to cast.
It depends on how long you want your game to be. Like if you're playing against a deck that is like going to stretch games out, and maybe I'm just going to say words. I don't know if this is how it actually is implemented. They take out their negates or something. Maybe Gideon becomes wide open even if you have to cast it on turn 7, and then it's
it does. I feel like I might be tempted to put a Plains in the sideboard.
I think 2 Aether Hubs is weird. What do you think about that?
2 Aether Hubs is weird.
I think it's weird in the opposite way that I thought it was weird in the mono black aggro. Like the mono black aggro,
I know what you mean.
No interest.
I agree.
In 2 Aether Hubs. In this, I got no interest in 2 Aether Hubs. That one I wanted none. This one I want 4.
Oh, this one you want 4?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That I was going the other way. I actually
want none in either deck.
Yeah, but for opposite reasons. I think that in the other deck, I don't mind it as much in the other deck. I just think that it isn't really going to be what decides the game.
It's greedy cute in the other deck.
Right, it is greedy cute in the other deck. This deck, I think it's just it's too short term of planning. It's like the value you're getting out of it being Aether Hub instead of Plains It's fine. I mean, maybe you're supposed to, but like, I don't know. I don't know. I think 2 ether hubs might be okay.
Well, here's my take. Plains is really bad with Restless Dead, and it just struck me that he only has 2 Restless Dead.
I'm not that big into the Relentless Dead.
I'm sorry, Relentless Dead, not Restless. Really? I think Relentless Dead is really good.
Oh, see, I think that the best thing Relentless Dead has going for it is that it's a 2-drop. You see, when you have Diragraph Colossus, Lord of the Accursed, Plague Belcher, and Dark Salvation, which, by the way, it is a crime, metaphorically, that Zach is only playing 2 Dark Salvations.
2 plus 1.
Yeah, but I think it should be 4 plus any amount they would ever let you play. I think it is crazy to not play 4 Dark Salvation.
This is literally the deck, right, for Dark Salvation.
Dark Salvation is one of the absolute best payoffs in a tribe with 10 payoffs. Dark Salvation is what is popping. I do not think you could possibly play enough Dark Salvations in a deck like this.
When would you want to side in Blinding Mummy?
Oh, Blinding Mummy's actually... I don't mind Blinding Mummy. If you're already going to play... If you're going to play the white... let's just take it as a given that you're going to play the white.
Well, Wayward Servant is insane in this deck.
That's true. That's the reason.
It's bananas. So.
Right. So if you're gonna screw up your mana enough to be able to support Wayward Servant, which I think is defensible.
That's why I want to play 4 Ether Hubs. Like, you need to
I get it.
him.
Yeah, but I also just like Plains. I don't know. I'm a sucker. But Binding Mummy, I actually don't mind. I don't know if it ends up being the thing you actually need. It is somewhat of modest power level, but it's for the green matchups. You know the type, where they're just dropping lots of, like, Sylvan Advocates,
right, so I'm
all that stuff. Vizier.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're black, though. Like, you don't need to tap a thing and then put a crappy body in play. I guess it's a zombie. It triggers Wayward Servant. I guess it's fine.
And Lord of the Accursed, and Diragraph Colossus.
All right.
Plague Belcher, all of it.
Convinced.
It's also something you can find with your Liliana the Last Hope, so to speak. You know, it's kind of a sideways way to do it. But I just think you want to play 4 Dark Salvations. End of story. So Garrett Darley actually played 4 Dark Salvations in his Mono Black Zombies deck. It was the 22nd place finishing list. He stuck to Mono Black, and instead of playing those Wayward Servants, used, very, very similar list all the way down, but instead of 4 Wayward Servants, he got the 2 extra Relentless Dead and 2 extra Dark Salvation. And then instead of 2 Never to Return, he's got 2 Liliana's Mastery. And then instead of playing only 20 land, he went all the way up to 23 because he actually wants to cast all these sick 3-drops. Not to mention
Mastery. That's a Magic the Gathering card. First of all, it costs an arm and a
Goat
leg.
Ranger. It does.
It's just like a lot of mana, but it is. I guess a pretty powerful card, right? So all your zombies get +1/+1. So it's like the 5
it's
casting
6 right there.
Yeah, but it's
Cloud Goat Ranger by itself.
Yeah, I think if you're going to invest in this direction, maybe play 4.
So I thought about it. It might not be wrong, but I think it's kind of greedy because Dark Salvation is often a 5-drop.
Okay.
So there is some tension. It might still be right to play more. I just think that even though Liliana's Mastery has some appealing aspects to it, I think that there's so many 3s and Dark Salvation that I would be surprised if 4 Liliana's Masteries was right. Not surprised. I'd be mildly surprised.
Here's the thing about Liliana's Mastery. This card is, like, very expensive for a deck like this, right? He's only has 23 lands. He's got a lot of weenie-ish type things, right? So this is theoretically a low-to-the-ground deck. But this pays you for having weenies. But it's not a diminishing returns type card. Every Liliana's Mastery that you draw and play after the first Liliana's Mastery is, like, way better than the previous one.
No, they're not way better. I don't know. They stack, but it's not like it's better. I mean, the first one is still stronger. It's because, like, you end up in these spots where if your opponent doesn't have a sweeper or evasion or a combo or something, you're going to win anyway. Right.
I don't know. I think this, like, the thing is,
it's exciting. I think it's very exciting.
Really exciting. The it's not like a good Magic card in the abstract, right? If there's a deck,
No, I think it is.
When I say in the abstract, I mean just like you don't play it in a deck, right? You play it in this kind of a deck. But here it's just got such a contextually, let's go for it home. It's so engaging of a card in this kind of a deck.
Yeah, I would say it goes from being like a fringe playable to actively good, because of the tribal synergies.
What about this sideboard? What do you think about this? He's got like a lot of good cards that are weirdly positioned in the sideboard. Like Gifted Aetherborn is so non-intuitive to me. Like, is that for green decks?
Really? Well, no, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think Gifted Aetherborn is most commonly going to be a sideboard card. It's like it doesn't synergize with anybody's anything, right? Like it's not the right size to crew the right vehicles. It's not the right creature types. It's not like it doesn't do any of the synergies that anybody's deck is ever normally looking for. It just happens to be a very effective card to sideboard against aggressive decks, particularly red.
Yeah, but it's pretty bad against
and white. Sorry, it's also
I guess it's insane against every other guy, right?
It's for the Boros human decks.
I guess I would just gladly trade. What about Haunted Dead? That seems kind of a.
So the Haunted Dead is part of a package. It's a little surprising to me. I don't know how it plays out. I haven't tested something like that. I guess the theory is that Haunted Dead and Call the Bloodline form a package deal that are supposed to be on some kind of like weird grinding type of time. It's a little surprising to me because I feel like it actually tries to like play up aspects that the main deck is already doing. And I worry that all the cards that somebody would think are good against you are accidentally good against Haunted Dead, Call the Bloodline. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And all of these are good cards. Like I love Gifted Aetherborn. Haunted Dead has been a decorated card over and over again. We've talked about Call the Bloodline at a minimum a great sideboard card against Fever Visions, but it's got all kinds of applications. It's just weird that these are sideboard cards in this deck. They actually are like. I guess a 1/1 Black Vampire Knight is not necessarily what this deck is in for, but Haunted Dead is a zombie. But I guess it's not the right kind of zombie. Like, it seems it's just weird. I think we're talking about the same stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't do what this deck does in the main deck, but then it's still a good card in the right tribe, so it's... But you're not getting paid off. You're not, like, madnessing out vampires with it or anything.
So the highest finishing true control deck, I think number 16, Matthew Wright's Jeskai control deck with 4 Torrential Gearhulks. This is only creatures. Obviously supported by 3 Wandering Ephemerals for some backup kill. But his spell selection is very... very reminiscent of some stuff I've seen recently. So he's playing 4 cast out, and that's his only white in his main deck. So he's actually playing without any Fumigates, despite playing Jeskai. He's instead relying on 3 Magma Spray, 1 Sweltering Suns, 4 Harness Lightning, and then a bunch of permission, like 4 Censor, 3 Disallow, 2 Escape, 2 Negate.
Card.
I love Sweltering Suns.
It's really good.
But I think this is actually kind of an ingenious solution to how wonky the Jeskai mana is, because it's a little tough to play tons of Censors in a Jeskai deck if you're trying to actually cast Fumigate. Too many of your lands come to play tap sometimes. But this list cleverly avoids the problem by its only white is just 2 Port Town, 4 Irrigated Farmland, 4 Inspiring Vantage, 4 Aether Hub. So he manages to get 14 white, which, Aether Hub's not the most reliable white in the world, but it's not bad. But he gets to play a few extra untapped lands going this route, and he also part of the way he gets there is by playing with 27 land. Instead of like 25 or 26 like a lot of other people. He's playing 27 land in addition to 4 censor and 4 cast out.
Well,
this is somebody who is being not just honest, they're being very, very disciplined about their mana because they're relying on these pull from tomorrows to pull it all together, to pay them off later.
Yeah, so just to that note, his deck could play as few as 23 lands because of irrigated farmland could theoretically just cycle all of those guys.
Great point.
But then the 4 censor and 4 cast out make it so that even if he's a 23 land deck, he plays like a 27 land deck anyway, which is basically where this deck wants to be. So he can play also like a 31 land deck, which is probably a little bit high. But I think that there's just cool, subtle things going on, like cycling Censor and then buying it back with Torrential Gearhulk for Exactsies. Like, I think that's just a small, subtle thing that's going to be a big, big thing that this kind of a deck can do.
I would play Void Shatter, personally. I'm a Void Shatter guy. I know you love the disallows. I would play Void Shatter.
I mean, I don't know. I don't like Void Shatter. But
I know, and you like disallow, but disallow is like fancy.
What do you think about the magma sprays?
At least he has all 4. I think it's defensible to play 3+1. I would play 4, but I love magma spray in these kind of decks. I love magma spray. Love it. Love it.
It's perfect when it's perfect, right?
Well, it combos with stuff too. It sounds weird to think that like Harness Lightning plus Magma Spray is somehow like a desirable thing to ever do to anything, but sometimes
you gotta do what you gotta do, man.
Yeah,
I get it.
The equation is different when you're playing a Pull from Tomorrow deck.
Yes,
Pull from Tomorrow, you can afford to do some things like on the card disadvantage because you want to save some mana. Because when you pull, it'll all come together later.
I want to have more Pull from Tomorrows. That's my thesis. I think at least one more if I played this kind of a deck. He has so many effective lands. He plays like a 31 land deck.
What do you think of the sideboard? 2 Sphinx of the Final Word and 2 Linvala the Preserver. That's so many biggins.
I do not know what deck he thinks he's playing against that he needs 2 Sphinx of the Final Word. That is one that is a head scratcher for me.
That's a robust
control
number
of
like that's
7 casting cost control mirror cards.
I feel like even if you're in the space where you're just in for Sphinx of the Final Word, which I get it, I could be in for Sphinx of the Final Word. I kind of wonder about like a Kef vet or something. I don't know. Maybe Sphinx of the Final Word is like, maybe it's good to play 2 in the sideboard. It's reliable, I guess. It's just,
I guess like they probably don't have a sweeper. I guess so. Like if you tap out for it, it's probably gonna not.
My problem with Sphinx of the Final Word is I just think that Oath of Liliana and now Trial of Ambition and To the Slaughter, I just think that too many of the people where you want Sphinx of the Final Word, it's going to end up accidentally not lining up right.
Yeah, I don't love this card. It's just so expensive, and like you could invest in other things that do a similar thing. Like, so he's a blue-red deck, right? This is like a very, very specific kind of card that he has there that you can't play it really against like a combo deck, for example, right? It's too expensive. You're just dead. Like, why not go like Fevered Visions?
Vision. You could.
Like, Fevered Visions is awesome for your strategy and is faster at killing people.
I don't know, man. Maybe. But, like, it depends on what you're trying to go against. Fevered Visions, to me, has lost a little bit of stock because I think that people are just going to have cast outs, like, left and right that used to lose to Fevered Visions.
Yeah, but you've got cast outs, too.
Yeah, but they're going to have cast outs, too.
Yeah.
What do you think of Glorybringer? See, I'm a fan of not playing Glorybringer in the sideboard, But that's because I just play them all in the main deck of my control decks.
You would play Glory Bringer in the main deck of this deck?
Not even close, definitely.
That is not something I would have thought of doing off the cuff.
I don't think you know how much I love Glory Bringer.
I apparently don't, because I wouldn't. I mean, maybe it's right. I wouldn't have gone that direction.
Stormbreath Dragon? Chump.
Yeah, but you don't play Stormbreath Dragon in the main deck of your control deck.
Right.
Sideboard
and
your
what I'm
control
trying
deck.
to say is Glory Bringer is so powerful, I actually would.
I guess if the only thing you ever lose to is Gideon, then it's
No, it's not just about the Gideon thing, even though that's amazing. I just think Glory Bringer is a bananas card. It's so good. It's like, okay, so a 4/4 flyer with haste for 5 doesn't take much. We're on the same page about that, right? Like, it doesn't take
of Glory
much.
Bringer.
Right, but
You
I'm
don't have to
saying,
convince me, friend.
when you attack, you get to Lightning Blast. You just get a 0-mana kill spell. That's all I ever wanted in this world. Are you kidding?
Yeah, but the problem is you spent 5 and they make their removal good.
No!
What do you mean, no?
What removal spell?
Harness
They don't-
Lightning.
Harness Lightning? If they just have the extra energy laying around?
Essence Scatter. I don't know.
Essence? Please. What am I doing attacking with... Why am I playing Glory Bringer into Essence Scatter, man?
Playing the Mirror Match. All right.
Anyway, I think Glory Bringer is the freaking truth.
I will try it. I don't know. That seems goofball to me, but you've been right on many goofball calls over the years. I think it's weird how he has like so much like white in the sideboard, and by so much I mean a total of 2 kinds of spells, but one of them's got double white. I think Nahiri's actually awesome in this deck because you have like all kinds of stuff you might want to discard.
Just to be clear, by the way, I don't think it's out of the question to sideboard the Glory Bringers or not play them at all. I just personally would want to do it that way, but I don't blame somebody for not wanting to.
Is this 1 Sweltering Suns in the main deck a low number? That seems like a perfect card for this deck.
I think it's a low number. I think that card's pretty good.
I think I'd play like 3. It's cycling. Just get rid of it.
Cycling 3 is very different than cycling 1, just to be clear.
Yeah, I agree, and not having to keep this card in a match that's going to go long anyway is... You're not going to ever cycle it in matches where it's good. Like, if you're killing Winding Constrictors, you're just going to cast it even if it's the only creature in play.
So, I know we got to duck out in a minute here, but your boy, Ali Antrazi, blue-green, 54th place with an exotic, to say the least, blue-green ramp deck. Ramping out the quick Ulamog the Ceaseless Hungers, taking advantage of a somewhat non-traditional package of 2-mana accelerators in Naga Vitalist and Ulvenwald Captive to help power out Hedron Archive into Nissa's Renewal into Ulamog. But he's rocking the Pull from Tomorrow's for big numbers, part the Water Veil because he's a man with style, and then Commencement of Festivities as a 5th Fog because he already has 4 Haze of Pollen.
Yeah,
what do you think of this list?
I don't.
You see, we got 1+2 Commencement of Festivities. Anybody who plays 1+2 Commencement of Festivities, you have to take seriously. You don't just arrive at that mix randomly. That's somebody who they are doing it on purpose. They know what's up.
I mean, I'm a little puzzled. Like, I tried Hedron Archive into Crusher Tentacles. I found it to be counterproductive.
Yeah, but he's just playing 1 Crush. The Crush is like a side angle. I actually don't mind that part.
I don't know. The 4 Nissa's Renewals, that's like a person who knows what he wants in life, I think.
Yes.
I don't know. I think this... I'll play around.
To me, here's the big takeaway. There's 2 takeaways to this deck that I think are very important. The first is Pull from Tomorrow in a ramp deck. Pull from Tomorrow in a ramp deck is a potentially big change, right? Like that. He pulls the hardest, right? Like there's no question he pulls the hardest. and then the use of 4 commit to memory, both because a blue-green deck doesn't usually get to play with Heroes Downfall, and then also because this is a deck that can actually Time Twister. Like when he accelerates a whole bunch, sometimes the Time Twister will be much better for Antrazi than for his opponents.
Well, I mean, when you have a mana advantage, that's typically what's going on, right? Especially if you can go like Crush Time Twister.
Or if you just go Time Twister and leave 2 open, because with 4 Haze of Pollen and a Commencement of Festivities, there's a decent chance you'll draw a Fog.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, I think this is like pretty out there. Might be super exciting, but it's also really weird, right? Like the sideboard is really weird. Why is Naga Vitalist better than what's that? What's the artifact that is good now because of all the cycling lands? It's like the Felwar Stone, but
the Corrupted Graphstone.
Yeah, it seems like that card is at an all-time high to me. Like, I feel like if I were going to play this strategy, I would invest in something along the lines of a Wastes and then play Ruin in Their Wake and that card.
It's kind of just really surprising to me to want to play Naga Vitalist.
Yeah.
Because, so there's Corrupted Graphstone, but he doesn't actually have enough cycling that I would count on it. The one I would play is just Channeler Initiate.
Like, Ulvenwald Captive is also weird, right?
It's but at least Ulvenwald Captive transforms into a threat. Maybe it's right, maybe it's
7.
Maybe it's right, maybe it's not. But the part that gets me about Naga Vitalist is that Channeler Initiate starts as a 0/1. The first time you use it, it's a 1/2, and then it turns into a real threat quickly.
Yeah, that's a good card.
Now, it does run out, and maybe you're just like, I want to tap my mana creature more than 3 times. But I don't know. I could also just... I mean, he has traditionally been ahead of the curve at identifying some of the ramp options that are not just the straightforward play the new cards in the right curve,
Yeah.
He had to have been at the very tippity... He was at the cutting edge. He was the first to be Emeralding so hard, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's always been the engine guy, right? I think that he's going to look like a genius every time he's like Hedron Archive, Renissa's Renewal, Hardcast, Ulamog anyway. Like, it's just... That's just going to be a thing. He's going to be the guy who did it. The fact, like, anybody who can hardcast Ulamog with any level of regularity is automatically a hero. They're also a villain. They're, casting Ulamog makes them a
no, they don't become a villain until their deck is mainstream.
And then they're like a really big... Do you remember when you were like the innovator because you next leveled together Counterbalance and Top? But then when everyone did it, they're like, this is horrible, we have to ban it. It just took 13 years.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I disavow Sensei's Divining Top.
All right. Well, I disavow the rest of this episode. Let's chop out for this week. Tons of awesome stuff to talk about. I'm really excited about some of the new decks that have come out. I think that Marduk's going to obviously continue to be viable, but we're already seeing cracks in the potential molting of the metagame. So red, white, these engine decks, and control, cycling stuff. It's all going to be interesting stuff coming up.
It's all happening!
It is. Not a copycat to be seen. If you want to see us, we are Top Level Podcast. We're Top Level Podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram.
Patreon. YouTube,
yeah. And in the light of Patreon, I would like to shout out to Zachary Summer from Patreon. Thanks,
Zach.
Yep, thanks for supporting us, Zachary. You guys want to support us, that'd be sweet. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, and if you check out on YouTube, also check out Embrace Variants, the track We Were Nothing, playing shortly after this.
I would just have to say I love that song.
We were nothing.
Lack of respect for all you've been through, lack of respect for your differing views, lack of empathy for your choices a lot, and all of the things that we're not. I'm sorry our project didn't work out, and for the suffering I brought about. I feel like I've been trodden down, reckless words we should scout. You straight took it out of me a great amount, described me views I was not about. This cut me deeply and you knew it hurt, but to write me off just another guy's dirt. You always knew that I was a flirt, but you no longer trust me and that won't work. It's been so long you wonder why do I care, what does that imply? Something I struggle with deep inside, torture myself when I say goodbye. My friends, I care passionately, lost my composure, it's a tragedy. Thought we connected powerfully, but clung to it too forcibly. Didn't know what to be like growing to do, wonderful chapter, but it did conclude. I love you, my friend, and always will. I hope you find your happiness still. Live a life we were never something.